And I'm just looking at the time. And so if everyone's good to go, maybe we'll get this started. And I noticed that there's a number of people who've started to write in. So hi, Sarah. Hi, Kim. Nice to see you. And Erica Lee. Great. So a number of names that we recognize. Glad you guys were able to join. Oh, fantastic. So my name's Kim Bouffard. I'm with Engineers Canada. I'm the Manager of Belonging Engagement there. And so I'm really happy that all of you have taken the time out of your busy schedules to join us today, which is an opportunity for us to share some information about a report that we commissioned about where is the E in STEM. Joining me to give this presentation today is Brenden. He's Vice President of Client Development and Innovation for MUQO Research. This is the research firm that we commissioned to create the report. Brendan's been in marketing and communications for well over 15 years. He has expertise in qualitative and quantitative research, which is also, of course, the expertise of his firm. I'm also joined by Rebecca White. And so Rebecca is the CEO of Engineers of Tomorrow. And we've been working, like Engineers Canada has been working with Engineers of Tomorrow for a number of years, and that they support quite a few of our K-12 outreach programs. So we're glad that they're both able to join us today to help to do this. Just sort of some context on the report. Basically, Engineers Canada commissioned this out of the concern that we're wondering, where is the E in STEM? Like, is it getting lost within the K-12 system? And we're concerned about this predominantly because, as many of you know, Engineers Canada is sort of the voice of the profession. And as that, we have a couple of key initiatives. And one of the big ones that we're trying to achieve is we're trying to diversify the profession, and we're trying to ensure that this profession remains relevant and is sustainable. And when we started looking at the pipeline, so if you think about like where people first hear about engineering and then when they eventually become an engineer, we realized that this is a very complex system, systems within systems that are helping to influence some of that end goal. And so we wanted to figure out, well, let's look at the very beginning. Let's look at the beginning of the pipeline and figure out sort of what's going on there. And that was really the purpose of this report, was to start to really zero in on where is the E in STEM. Is it being lost? Is this going to be something that's going to make our work a little harder down at the other end of the chain? And so that's what we decided to do, and that's what we're going to share today. In addition to that, we're hoping to also share some insights, and that since we've had a chance to take a look at this report, we have a couple ideas of how we might be able to move forward together, and that's the reason why we invited all of you today. So you'll notice that on the key slide, the starting slide here, there's all kinds of little dots and numbers, or not dots, but like circles and squares. And that is actually part of an ecosystem map that came out of this project. And everyone who's on the call today, you were part of this map. And you're the groups that helped us to create this and generate this report. So we're very interested in directly engaging with you, because we know that if there's anything that we want to move forward to make any kind of changes whatsoever within the K-12 ecosystem in particular, it's something I'm going to do with you. And so we're really looking forward to diving into this. The other thing that you'll notice, this is going to be kind of a casual presentation, in that we want you to be engaging in conversation throughout the process. We don't want to just be talking at you. So we're gonna have some polls, but feel free to leverage this chat, not just to ask questions of myself or Rebecca or Brenden, but also just to talk amongst yourselves as you're starting to, as you hear things and you're starting to have things come to mind. Feel free to leverage the chat to talk amongst yourselves. And of course, we're going to ensure that there's going to be other opportunities beyond this session, hopefully for us to come together and have a deeper dive and conversation about this. So without further ado, I am going to pass the mic over to Brenden, who's going to give us an overview, a summary of what we discovered through this report. So over to you.
Thank you very much, Kim, and very nice to see everybody. So I feel like I must preface by asking, can you hear me? I'm looking at the chat here. I just need anyone to say yes. Anyone at all. I see Sarah. Yes, I got some yeses. I got so many yeses. This is good. And I have to tell you, watching the chat as we were just getting ready here, this is actually extremely indicative of our experience with this project, working with this group and discussing these issues with engineer advocacy groups across the country. There's obviously a lot of passion here. Everyone's very open, very, very, very friendly. And we've, part of this project, or really this project was all about getting a good understanding of what we learned that a lot of you have, sort of felt or have sort of been working against or putting effort against throughout your careers when it comes to putting the E in STEM, frankly, put engineering as an integral part of, of the STEM, of the entire STEM kind of ecosystem. So towards that, we did a variety of things. We did a current K-12 initiative and practices scan. So our program evaluators did an environment scan of all of the different published and provided pieces of documentation around those things which were included in existing curricula. We spoke with influencers in the NGO sector, many of whom are here today. We tried to do an analysis of enrollment data, and we'll talk a little bit about the challenges around that and some of the actions that we could perform there after. And of course, literature review of best practices, and then talking to all of you about how STEM has been incorporated into engineering concepts. So we do have the full report, and Kim and Rebecca have the full report, and that either it has been made available to you or it will be shortly. But everything we talk about here has sort of chapters that go into greater detail. So I will go over the kind of the top pieces. So just a high level here, we did this Canadian jurisdictional scan. We did an online survey with responses from supportive organizations, 20. I bet you all 20 of you are probably here. And we did interviews with education and industry associations and NGOs to inform some of this, in addition to our secondary reviews. So conclusions. The very first one that we want to talk about here is that, and again, it's probably no surprise to many of you, again, kind of basing it on the conversations that we have had. Engineering specific targets are missing from many K-12 curriculums nationally. So a little bit of proof point there. So we did find that there's a lack of centralized curriculum in Canada. It means that there's no push towards specific goals to achieve in K-12. So nationally, we're seeing that curriculums do vary in how they treat engineering in K-12. So in some provinces, like we found in BC, they do have an engineering as a course offering, while others in some other provinces do not explicitly identify engineering as a learning outcome or goal. When it is incorporated, one thing that we're finding is that engineering is brought in later into the curriculum. So in markets where engineering specifically is incorporated into the curriculum, so we have a couple of examples like BC and Manitoba, we still find that it is in later years. So when you learn about math, math is sort of, you're sort of born knowing that math is coming. You're not born knowing that engineering is coming, and we find that that is something that is pervasive through many, many places. So our findings from a review of the literature indicate that earlier engagement in, well, really any subject area can lead to increased interest in the subject, and certainly that's the case in engineering specifically. So this is something that is worth looking at. By the way, the chat remains open here, so don't feel pressured to, but if you have a comment either to me or generally or amongst yourselves, again, this is meant to be sort of fluid. You could just give me a thumbs up or anything at all, but the chat is there for you. Our second conclusion is that there is a lack of understanding of what constitutes engineering among K-12 educators. So you can imagine how our conclusion 1 and our conclusion 2 are actually related to one another. So here we're finding ourselves that educators themselves may have difficulty teaching engineering due to a lack of understanding of the language and models used to incorporate engineering concepts into the classroom. So this in particular was confirmed and reinforced in our key informant interviews, which is not incredibly surprising given that curriculums in Canada don't recognize engineering as a unique subject from the rest of STEM. So certainly if the educators, if the teachers who might otherwise be responsible for conveying this information aren't very comfortable with it, you could imagine why it's not coming across. Now, and this next point here, the word engineering in STEM can get lost within the K-12 environment. So this, we tip this off based on the name of this report, which is where's the E in STEM. We find that K-12 students and educators might simply not be aware that things that we would call to be engineering are engineering. So educators and organizers are facilitating a breadth of engineering-related activities in the K-12 space, but is often not labeled that way. So there's a sense in which we don't get credit for it. As I'm talking, I'm hoping anybody can throw into the chat some of the things that maybe we would call engineering. What might other people refer to it as? What is the sort of the ghostwriter for engineering sometimes that is used instead of that actual term science? I'll let you guys plop those things down as I carry on. Yep, looks good. So although we find that engineering concepts are being taught in the classroom, students with a growing passion for what we call engineering may not consider it to be a path, an education path, a career path, simply because it's not named or well defined in the K-12 space. So there's a couple, technology, physics, coding as problem solving. Phyllis says in primary grades it's called science. I think these are great. These are great points, and I'm sure we imagine that those who develop curricula are not doing this on purpose, right? So there's again, I'm sort of tipping off our common advocacy role in potentially addressing this. I see Erica's typing "carry on." Don't let me stop you by moving on. Our third conclusion is that there is a measurement problem when it comes to assessing the delivery of engineering education in Canada. So I alluded to this earlier when I mentioned that part of our process was to take a look at some of the existing data here. But as we move along, we find a few things here. We find, first of all, that student level data to help show the proportion of students with engineering readiness, their performance in the required prerequisite classes, and their demographic details is simply not available. It may or may not be available, or it also possibly might not exist. So it is currently simply not feasible to identify student audiences that are underrepresented, or jurisdictions where K-12 approaches to engineering are performing particularly well, or the effectiveness of key drivers or initiatives in producing success. So this lack of general information, right? So if we think about the inputs or the independent variables on the dependent variable or the output, those would be the pieces that we would typically be looking for as as stats, number, process-minded people. This is why I love engineers, which is why I find this such a great fit. That kind of chain, that causal chain between what is happening and what the outcomes are, we don't really have the information globally, or I guess I'll say nationally, to answer some of these key questions. We also find that there's a lack of data available to evaluate the success of individual programs and initiatives being implemented by organizations doing this type of work. So our key informants in this research often cited a lack of capacity and funding as challenges in conducting thorough program evaluations, which makes it hard to continuously build and improve the programs and identify which efforts bring about the most success, right? So if you think about yourself, you've got $100 in your wallet and you want to spend some of it doing something, and you want to spend some of it evaluating that thing. Well, if 60 of your dollars should be spent evaluating, you might not feel the return on investment on that particular thing. So that this isn't really a one thing that came out in all of our conversations and all of our scans here is not that there is dereliction of duty in this. It's that this is an extra onus, which is difficult to do. And there's a bit of, in some instances, feeling like we're reinventing the wheel if we try to also apply this. So moving forward, we find that the best way to establish and identify best practices to support K-12 goals and engagement is to track the potential to meet future labor market needs and to close the gap in data collection and availability. So that's easier said than done. And we'll talk in a minute about how that takes more, you can't tell one actor to do this. This is a collective action type thing to be considering, where we can find efficiencies wherein. Kim mentions here that privacy legislation also adds barriers to following students. I think that's an extremely good point. if anybody has any other notes here, just sort of like, you look at this conclusion, you say, hey, me too, or hey, these are some other barriers, throw them in the chat. Not just because it's fun to chat, which it is, but all of these pieces of information we're also going to be using as inputs. So this is a data collection experience. And also, by the way, to preface a little bit later, there's going to be some ongoing opportunities for that as well. Conclusion 4. We have found that there are several groups and organizations doing good work in the promotion of engineering among young people across Canada. So, this isn't just a throwaway conclusion, right? Like, this isn't just us saying thank you to all of those who participated in the feedback process here. Now, although we do thank you, this was actually quite a pervasive finding for us. There are several industry organizations and subject matter areas where this is not true of, where it's not the case that there are many groups and organizations doing this type of work. So there's something about engineers, there's something about the group of people here assembled today that causes this to be so. So just basically, we find that many organizations work to promote engineering K-12 in Canada, and organizations across Canada are providing programs and resources to educators and youth in and outside of the classroom. And we did a bit of a content analysis of the kinds of groups and initiatives that seem to be available to youth in Canada. So we find that there are camps, there is PD for teachers and resources for them. Classroom visits. So we'll have engineers and engineer-affiliated folks going to classrooms, and mentorship programs, which sometimes actually includes employment or internship. Following a lot as well, summer employment programs exist, tournaments and competitions. Actually, I'm a 2007 Skills Canada gold medalist, but not anything useful. It was in public speaking. There is funding available. We do find networking and community events and gender-based initiatives. So there's a ton going on across the country, which is an opportunity. If we're all feeling individually that there are barriers or that some things are, we're going against some headwind, it's nice to know that we're not alone. So this is a question I have for you. I'm wondering, and just toss this in the chat. I'm curious about your reflections on these conclusions. And, as we look through them, I'm just going to flip through them quickly. I want to see some things in the chat. So the first one we have, there are targets missing from K-12. There's a lack of understanding among educators. There's a measurement problem, and there are indeed groups doing this. What do folks think? Is there anything surprising here? Is there anything well, let's start with surprising. I'm going to wait on the chat there. So Kim says, agreed on the conclusions. Even under camps, we sometimes forget to name engineering. I'm going to wait here. We're okay on time. I see a few others typing, and yeah, let's hang here, because this is interesting, because I wonder, Renee says, not a surprise. My only exposure to engineering was separate from K-12 education. I'm also curious if anybody has a sense for, among these these 4 main buckets, if there's anything here that kind of feels most true, or kind of most a big barrier to you. Hi, Zoe. Perhaps it's Zoe from Toronto. Not surprising. Personally, you've not been introduced to the actual field of engineering until grade 11 or 12. I see Victor and a couple of others. I'm gonna let these chats come through for a minute. Sarah says, in your local high school, you find that critical thinking and engineering design are thought of as soft competencies. Erica says, engineering is so varied and complex and ever evolving. It's no wonder it's a challenge to communicate or explain it. Great point. Victor says, I'm not surprised seeing math is becoming an issue when it comes to the middle school ages. I would expect engineering to have more difficulty having traction in grade 12. Sure, because math itself, it can seem scary. So maybe engineering would too. That's an interesting point. Very interesting point. Renee says, my grade 9 student was able to choose pre-engineering as an option for grade 10. Phyllis says, I have 2 kids in K-12. In the elementary school system, even when STEM is used, engineering is not mentioned separately. It is interesting, right? STEM is the only, oh goodness. Vowel. Wow, wow. It's the only vowel in STEM. It's the one thing that makes STEM a sayable word. But you're right. I wonder if folks know what that E is. Nijin and Scott are typing. Then I'm going to move to the next little bit here. After we see the two of you, Nijin says, "I've experienced conclusion number 2 the most." Let's go and remind ourselves. Conclusion number 2: this lack of understanding of what it constitutes it. So even in post-secondary space, many are not clear about what it is that engineers study or do. I'm going to let Scott's comment come through. I see Philip is typing. Feel free to continue, but I'll let Scott or Phyllis, whoever gets there first. But please keep typing. I like this chat on the side. We're all innovating together here. Scott says, I sometimes ask the question, what do we want students to learn about engineering in the various grades? Is it engineering specific concepts or skills, impact on society? So in essence, what do we want teachers or groups to actually teach? That's interesting. So it's sort of like, what are the main messages? I'm kind of hearing there. And Phyllis says, another observation is there's a lot more emphasis on social skills and acceptance, a good thing, and less focus on academics like math. I love this. I mean, I could stay right here all day long. I'm going to let Erica finish this comment just because I think this is so rich. Erica says it's a tricky thing to filter accurate messages back to kids. The only thing I heard in high school was, you're good at math and science, you should really do engineering. Really, engineering is so much more. Yeah, absolutely. What if you don't want to do what you would otherwise consider to be math or science, because engineering is its own integrated individual thing? These are extremely interesting points. Please continue typing. I'm going to move along here, but don't let that stop you. So based on these findings and our feedback loop, our back propagation of these findings in the conversations that we have had, we formulated a few recommendations that, of course, I'll be looking for your feedback on. Erica says, engineering is its own thing. Thank you, Brenden. You're quite welcome, but this comes from you. So our first recommendation here is I don't think it's any surprise. I think the chat has already previewed this recommendation, is to promote the explicit inclusion of engineering in curriculum across Canada. So here we're saying, maybe we want to advocate for engineering to explicitly be identified in K-12 learning objectives or outcomes in all provincial curricula. So we could look at some examples, for BC, Manitoba, Ontario, Quebec, Yukon, Northwest Territories. They all have some degree of this. There's something to learn. There are some best practices to mine from. Now, I'm sure there are folks, probably even right here in the chat today from BC, Manitoba, Ontario, Quebec, Yukon, and the Northwest Territories, who are going to tell us that it's not perfect here either. That's okay. Obviously no one has the right answer. Maybe that's, whether or not that's obvious, I can tell you from our research, we haven't found a jurisdiction or that has gotten this perfectly down pat. But there are some best practices to pull from. So this essential move will help further encourage educators to talk about engineering more directly, using the right language in the classroom. They're trying their best. Can you imagine being a teacher? Well, I know some of you actually are, in fact, teachers. What a difficult task. What a breadth of topics. What a breadth of passions that are coming from students. It's an art and a science in a way that engineering is too, I believe, to try to meet those things up and do some matching, right? Like, our best educators are the ones who can identify a passion and a capacity in a student and provide new opportunities, provide paths, provide suggestions for inquiry. And if we can have engineering being on the menu for what some of those matches could be, we might find a little bit more success. Let's see what some other chats here. So Erica says, love to see these days. My 7-year-old is coding already and doing inquiry, open-ended research and problem solving. 7 years old. Hey, does your 7-year-old want a job at MQL research? So the second one here, recommendation to focus on language. You know, these are related, right? You know, categories, pigeonholes, they're useful. You know, we do discriminating in our language for a reason, because it's a shortcut for categories of things that combine, but they also do us a disservice sometimes. So language is not nothing. So we find that, you know, just literally something very, very simple, promote the increased use of the word engineering in the classroom, and increase educator confidence by establishing and promoting simple to understand shared definition and messaging. So for example, we could establish a simple and shared definition of engineering that is appropriate for different grade levels. And I love this piece of feedback that came through our research, the idea that, okay, of course we know what engineering is, but sometimes higher level or more advanced concepts are used in our definition of engineering, and they're not there yet, right? Like, so perhaps you've heard, you know, people ask you, you know, explain it to me like I'm a third grader. Actually, that's a good lens that we could use for how we might want to consider using or socializing the word engineering for different groups. What does engineering mean for somebody in the third grade? What does engineering mean for somebody in 10th grade? I want to take a poke at some of these chats here. So Scott says, is there a direct approach to target teacher education degree granting programs? I see. For example, to include a course or module to be included in pre-service teacher programs. So Scott here is asking, you know, is there a way that we can actually use the system that produces teachers to socialize some of these terms a little bit better? Bilal is saying that engineering is the application of math and science. Whenever the students are working in projects in STEM, they are doing engineering. It's a matter of explaining it at their level. Yeah, absolutely. Erica says, I like this, add new layers as kids get older and can handle more detail and complexity. That's exactly what we're finding, right? It's because, you know, people could disagree with me. I'm not an engineer, but having been steeped in this research and also knowing a fair number of engineers myself, my partner is an architect, so we have a lot of engineer friends. I just know it is an integrative practice, and how it integrates. You know, this is just taking on Bilal's point here. The ways we can explain that probably change by the things that could be integrated, but the things that our audience already knows, our students already know, what can we piece together at different points in their development? Recommendation 3, establish a mechanism to gather and utilize shared data. Now, this might come from a market research firm full of statisticians, but this didn't come from us, it came from you. And again, this is why engineers are such kindred spirits with the work that we do. So this doesn't happen by accident or automatically, right? You know, to create and utilize shared data to encourage a focus on the right initiatives, to promote collective advancement and to track progress. So here we're recommending to advocate for access to a shared provincial enrollment database for K-12 students at the student level to track progress, which would allow the objective measurement in promoting the pursuit of engineering as a career path. Some folks earlier mentioned that there are provincial regulatory barriers to a step like that. Well, I mean, to me, it's one of the hurdles to address. So none of these are easy recommendations. None of these are recommendations that we ought to have done in the first place. They're hard, but it's really about looking for a shared vision for how to approach them. Identified shared performance indicators for key initiatives in organizations. So one thing I'll tell you is that it's easier to measure things when we all have a clear definition of what the measurement is. So to the extent to which that we can understand what we want to measure and how we want to measure it, the easier it will be to do that sharing and do that collection and to look at it over time and across jurisdictions. And likewise, establish shared KPIs. They're really related, and collect long-term data. I can tell, I'm just going to pause and read some chats once again. So Erica says, I need to manage nuance in explaining what engineering education is versus engineering and practice. Absolutely. What do folks think about data? Anyone who has any thoughts about recommendation number 3, I'd like you to just toss it in the chat. I won't wait on it, but I'd love to hear what folks think about this challenge and this opportunity around data sharing. And then the last one here, it sort of ties it together, is to increase communication and collaboration. Before I go, I see Kim saying that the OEN is a good tool, but you need to seek permission, including from parents. Kim, could you spell out what OEN is? So, recommendation number 4. Increased communication and collaboration are necessary to achieve those goals that we have talked about here. So this was something that was loud and clear and very heartening to us, that there are many exceptional initiatives and programs in Canada promoting engineering in this space. But we find that the efficient coordination across Canada has resulted in lessened local impacts, with most organizations working a little bit independently despite sharing similar goals and mandates. So we could think of this as a little bit of reinventing the wheel in some instances across, right? Because even the process of finding what the best practices are is not automatic. So there's a supply and demand problem here in terms of knowing what the efficiencies are in the first place, and then actually actioning them. So an increase in collaboration and communication opportunities would increase the impact by allowing organizations to share lessons learned and also maximize resources by working together. So the OEN is the OEN. Let me just scroll up. OEN, Ontario student number, right? Okay. Oh, so I see. So the OEN is like an identifying number. So the idea of being able to kind of attach longitudinal information across students. And Kim notes, ethics and consent. Yes, obviously, this is one of the barriers. This is the balance. Is how do we come up with a process or advocate for a process that respects anonymity and confidentiality, but provides that value of just a higher efficiency insight over time. Right, exactly. This is why we have groups working on this, and why the answer isn't obvious. Kim also says common questionnaires would be useful based on research. Yes. So I'm going to bring up an actual poll here. I'd like to ask the question here. So I hope this isn't too slow. I also have to apologize that I noticed that my presentation reverted back to an earlier version when Adobe had its little problem. But I can see people are figuring it out here. Which of these recommendations are you already acting on? Yeah, I'm getting a lot of responses already. This is good. So I'm going to just give it a second here. This is good. I'll share the results, I promise, but I want to let everyone kind of click who's going to click. This is interesting. This is fun to watch. It looks like it's slowed down. I'm going to show you the results. Okay, so here's what we're already doing. Here's what we're already acting on. All right, we can move things around. Yep, that's fine. And you can see that happening. It's kind of fun. So this is very cool. This is very interesting. So we have, lots of us are saying that we are doing strong communication and collaboration with like-minded groups. Like that's, most of us are saying that's something that we're up to. A lot of us are saying kind of poking at that engineering focus on language. That's good. I'm curious if folks anyone who clicked strong communication and collaboration with like-minded groups, it's not, you could give me a couple things there. You could tell me what it is you're up to, or you could tell me, if this seems to be pervasively so, what are some of the things that are, not maybe letting that effort kind of maximize impact. What are folks saying here? Okay, so I'm just going to read a couple comments here. Let's see. We've got Scott says, there's been some work done in the US around formalized STEM learning ecosystems to support K-12 education. I wonder if some of the evidence around collaboration and partnerships can be applied to things specifically around K-12 engineering education learning ecosystems in Canada. Great point. Phyllis says, focus on language is very important in promotion of women in engineering initiatives. Yes, 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 very good. Very good. ONWIE Summit. ONWIE Summit is coming up in November. I don't know Aaron Ketch. I assume others may, but this sounds like something. Oh, the Ontario Network of Women in Engineering. Very good. So, to kind of to bring us to a close, I think it's, or to kind of send us off into the last section here. Collective action. So this is partially a recommendation. We were asked in the outset of this project to consider how collective action could be utilized to help deliver some of the recommendations that would have come out of this report. And we find out that this really is the most natural fit, especially given where our baseline is across the country, with all of the groups represented here today and represented in our conversations. So, even some of my phasing didn't end up working properly. So there are a couple of things on the screen here that were to be hidden, but that's okay. Here's to say that there are several models, in the world that one can choose and can take off of the shelf to consider. But here, where we have so many groups pointing in the same direction, and I'm gonna bring this back over just to allude to it. 81% of us here are engaged in communication and collaboration with like-minded groups, right? So that is sort of a built-in value that we have as a group here. And so the collective impact model makes a lot of sense. And this is one where we consider the fact that there are several stakeholders. There are several different parties that could provide valuable input, not because democracy is a virtue, which I think it is, but even if you didn't think so, if all you were worried about was how we could sort of maximize output, right? If you could sort of optimize for a given output, given the amount of effort that is occurring and the kind of resources that are disparately being expended across the country, the idea of having a model to collectively focus that would make a lot of sense. Now, every time I think about this, I think about the Care Bear countdown. I don't know if this is if this is just a me thing, but 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and all the Care Bears shoot their love beam at the same thing and make a super big love beam. Pardon me if it doesn't make any sense to anybody, but the idea that if you could focus impact, it would do a lot of good. And there are several steps to this that I know that my partners here are taking very, very seriously. So I'm going to reveal the rest of the steps here. I'm going to push it over here to Kim to describe how this collective action model is something that we're taking seriously. Let's see if Kim is on mute at the moment. Kim, you're on mute, in case you don't know.
Sorry, it somehow
There you
disconnected the microphone. So I was like, where's the unmute button? And just
go.
anyway, thank you, Brent, for like that great overview about what we discovered through this report. And like you said, I think that for a lot of people on the call today, more than anything, it was just validating what you kind of already felt like you knew. And it sort of validated for us doing it, right? I mean, we kind of had feelings because, as you know, Engineers Canada is not a STEM-based organization, but we have a vested interest. We're kind of, I may be at the mercies of kind of a strong word, but it's like your success increases the likelihood of our success. And so we've always had a vested interest in K-12 education. And even many of the regulators across the country understand that when we're looking at the sustainability of the profession, that we need to start to look young quite early, right? Because there's just so many decisions that young people are making that are either going to increase the likelihood that they're going to be able to have the opportunity to pursue engineering or not. So when we started this report and when we saw the results, we started getting into it right away. We started thinking, okay, well, what are some of the things that we might be able to do to help to influence the system that ultimately is going to help, is going to have an effect on our success long term. And the collective impact model, as you can see, is sort of broken down into a number of different, we call it petals. And so some of the things that really stood out to us was the fact that in order for you to start to bring people together collectively, even if they have similar interests, is that you really need to have some kind of backbone coordinating organization just because of capacity. Someone or some group that has the capacity and the interest in ensuring that this moves along. And so that's one of the things that came out of it. The other thing, of course, is the open and continuous communication amongst the key stakeholders who have this common vision. And that's another point you see, a common agenda for change. Mutually reinforced activities, that's another big piece. And of course, what he was mentioning, the shared measurement for data results. What you see on the outside is sort of what we're thinking about and how we can move this forward. So when it comes to the backbone organization, this is something that we've started to seriously consider. And we thought that Engineers Canada, in partnership with Engineers of Tomorrow, may be able to serve that role to ensure that as we bring people like yourselves together to try and figure out how is it that we might be able to coordinate our efforts, that we would serve as an organization that might be able to support that. Not only, we think that there might be two reasons why that could make we'd be a good fit for this. The first one is that we're not a STEM-based organization. So we're not competing, or we don't have any specific biases towards one organization or another. We're at literally sort of that end user, the one who has a vested interest in your success, because it's going to help us increase what we're trying to achieve collectively as a profession. And so that's one of the reasons why we thought is sort of this impartial but yet vested body, that this might be an area we might be able to support. And we're starting with this report. The other thing that we acknowledge and that we think might be the hardest part of this whole process is it possible for us to come up with a common agenda for change? When we were looking at all the different organizations that exist across the country, almost all of them are focusing on STEM broadly, not E specifically. And of course, we're very much interested in the E. And so we thought that might be a way to start to mobilize some of the organizations around a specific focus. And that by focusing on the E, you're still able to talk about the S, the T, and the M. Like, the thing I like to say to people is that you could do science, technology, and math without engineering, but you can't do engineering without science, technology, and math. It's in the middle. It's the one that really unites all the pieces. But it is one of the pieces where, when you look at what's going on within the school system, that we're just not talking about, we haven't even given a name to it. And so could that be one of the ways that we start to focus in on some of our work together and have some kind of collective actions, collective goal around that? We have some ideas of what we could do short-term and long-term, and I'm going to pass it over in a moment to Rebecca to talk about some of those short-term pieces. But I want you to know that one of the things that we've already done is we've actually secured some funding in partnership with the Lee Cross Foundation and with Engineers of Tomorrow to be able to provide support to be a backbone organization. And we're engaging with you now because we're at the very beginning phases of this, and that we understand and we know that if we're going to do anything, we got to start right from the beginning, collaborating directly with you and building out what this could possibly look like. But we knew that even to get that going, we needed to have some kind of structure and funding in place in order to enable us to be able to have some capacity to move this forward. And so that's something that we've already done. So we already have some funding in place. It's actually Rebecca, who we've hired to be the project manager to help to move these things forward. So we have some structure already in place to start to move it forward. Now what we need to do is figure out who's interested in working with us to get this figured out. And so with that, I will pass it over to Rebecca to talk about when that next opportunity might be.
Thanks, Kim. Can everybody hear me? I think maybe Kim, if you, there we go. Now you can all see me. I am really excited to talk to everyone here. And first of all, I just want to take a second to thank all of you for joining us and for contributing to this conversation. I really relate to all of you as doers. I'm sure after hearing all of this insights shared by Brenden and what Kim has sort of given you that context, I can see through the chat, like, you're all seem to geared up and everybody here really wants to get involved and make this change and make a difference. So I'm really excited to be able to be the one that helps you do that. So as Kim mentioned, we want to do this in a smart and sustainable way, and we want this to be a collaborative, collective impact, right? As we build this together. So in order to be able to do that, we've kind of phased this out. And again, just reiterating, we are in the very beginning stages of what this could and will look like. So short term, we're looking at identifying just who are the smaller kind of core partners that we can bring together to put some of those building blocks in place as we or build the building. Or I was thinking about this morning, it's almost like we want to set the table before we bring everyone in for the whole dinner, the whole conversation. And we definitely do want to continue the conversation with everyone here. So what we have planned is, we're calling it a kickoff event, targeting doing that in June. We feel it is very important to do this as an in-person type of an event because we want to be able to have those really rich conversations and make sure everybody is able to contribute in the best way that they can. And so in terms of getting to that place, I invite all of you to just, let us know if you're interested. Like I said, we want to continue the conversation. So we will definitely be following up with everybody that was signed up for this event and invited to be a part of this report. And so you'll have our contact information. My contact information is up there on the screen for all of you as well. And from there, as we sort of get all of that information in, we will reach out to you to have further conversations. As I'm sure all of you, like myself, are feeling this was a lot to take in a relatively short amount of time. So we would love to just continue the conversation as we sort of build this out into the next few steps. And then as you see, like, we do have the next few stages mapped out, but we've kept it very high level because we do want you all to be part of what that could look like. So I think that's, yeah, so thank you, Brenden, for advancing to the next slide. And we wanted to just sort of close it out again, recognizing that this is a complex ecosystem, and I do relate to your Care Bear analogy, Brenden. So love that idea of seeing all of these different circles and squares and triangles sort of shining their light towards this common vision. And I do invite all of you to really keep in touch with us and stay connected. And thank you all again so much for your contributions. And I look forward to hearing from you all again soon. I'm not sure, Kim, did you want to close out with any final comments, or Brenden? There's been some back and forth in the chat, so sorry if I missed something there too. I'm seeing that everyone's excited. Kim Jones is saying me, yay, Kim. Where and when? Yes, we will be in touch.
I think maybe the one detail that I will add that I know that we've chatted with Rebecca and Kim is that all of the folks who signed up for this session, we'll get an email with some opportunities for continued engagement. And maybe I'll just set that up for you, Rebecca, to say a second about.
Absolutely. I will be, yeah. So anyone who has signed up for this session and everyone that contributed to this report, because I think there was about 85 different organizations that were a part of this. We definitely want to be transparent and make sure that you have access to all of this information and are invited to be involved in some way. And Scott's asking if the report will be shared. Yes, I believe it's going to be posted up on the Engineers Canada website. So you'll have access to the full report as well. Can't wait to continue talking with all of you. It sounds like there's a lot of energy around this, so I'm really looking forward to tapping into that.
Absolutely, and perhaps we could even commit to, if not in the very next follow-up email, certainly in at least a subsequent email, to share a link to that report to all the folks. Does that seem like something that we can commit to?
Oh, for sure. We'll make sure you have access. I know this audience. I'm sure I know you all like data.
Thank you all very much for joining us. This has been an excellent and enriching project. It's been so nice and so just sort of wholesome to speak to such a passionate group of people. So now, 1 minute before the hour, we'll let you out on time. Expect some follow-up communications. Thank you all so much. By the way, the session has been recorded. That too will be shared with you. Thank you all. Have a wonderful rest of the day.
Thanks, everybody. This has been fantastic. Thanks you, Brenden. Thank you, Rebecca. And yeah, I'm looking forward to this. So enjoy the rest of your day.